Welcome to the Thank Goddess podcast. My name is Danny. Welcome to the Thank Goddess podcast. My name is Danny, and sitting on my lap here is beautiful Luna. Do you want to say hi to everybody? Yeah, you are quite chatty today. Today we are going to be speaking about one of my favorite women to speak about and one of my favorite women to work with, and that is Mary Magdalene. I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, then you know that I have done many episodes prior to this on Mary Magdalene, and today I want to come at it from a different angle, and that is discussing Mary Magdalene as a Watchtower woman and really talking about or dissecting what that means. What does that mean to be a Watchtower woman? What is the significance of that? And perhaps if you're tuning into this episode, if you're drawn to content like this, if you're very curious about Mary Magdalene, then perhaps you are a Magdalene, you are a Watchtower woman, and we'll get more into that in today's episode. But to first off, begin with discussing the word Magdala or Magdalene. We often think that Mary Magdalene is a biblical figure, and it is said that she was born in a town called Magdala. But if you actually, go into the root of the word Magdala, Magdalene, you find that that's actually not correct, and there's a lot of evidence that allude to the fact that Magdalene is actually a translation for tower. So in Hebrew, Magdalene derives from the word Migdal, which translates to tower or fortress. Also in Aramaic, the word Magdalene translates to tower. So there's this idea that Mary Magdalene was a tower, a fortress. What does that mean? And it is said by a lot of people, it kind of gives rise to this idea that Mary Magdalene was a Watchtower woman, a watchtower of the flock. You may have heard that expression before, and I'm going to kind of go into why that is in today's episode. So what does it mean to be a tower or watchtower woman? What are we really getting to when we describe Mary as that? What does that say about her character? What does it say about the energy that she embodied? So to be a tower, if we think about towers, they are tall structures, right? And they essentially are rooted in the earth. They connect the earth, the ground, to the sky. They reach up very high usually. I mean, it depends on the tower, but usually when we speak of tower, we're thinking of a very tall structure that reaches into the heavens. And so there's this idea of connecting heaven and earth. So you might even liken the Watchtower woman or the tower to a priestess being a bridge between heaven and earth. A woman who is rooted in her divinity, a woman who is able to stream divine guidance through her physical vessel, which is the earth element, right? It's the body. And that was very much what Mary Magdalene was about, and also Joshua. They were very much about the intersection between the divine self and the human self. And that's what's called the anthropos, to be fully divine and fully human. And their message was never to leave the body. Their message was that heaven is here on earth. Heaven is within you. The kingdom is within you. So it's not to physically die, and then you go to heaven. No, you awaken heaven within yourself when you die to your ego, to the belief that you are this separate being, that you were just this physical human having a five senses experience here on planet Earth, and when you die, that's it, that's the end. We're here to die to that illusion of self that that most of us buy into when we incarnate on planet Earth, that we're just this physical construct. But the Watchtower woman is rooted in the truth of her being, that she is more than that we are all more than that we all have a divine part of us. We all stem from the one source. We are all connected to the one God, to the one universe, as above, so below. And it is in that remembrance of our divine self and anchoring more of our divine self into this human vessel that we resurrect as the Christ, as Jesus did. And it is through that that we awaken to our full potential. And that's actually when we step into our sovereignty, because we can't actually be sovereign if we don't know who we are, right? It's like if we don't know who we are, we don't awaken to the truth of who we are, then we forever stay powerless, I suppose, in a way, because we're not the cause of the effect. We're like living in the effect, which is the 3D world, in the tangible, without realizing that we have the power to shift our situation, to shift certain things in our lives, to shift our comprehension of reality. And if we never have that understanding, then we can't fully awaken to the sovereignty that's truly possible here on earth and awaken more of who we are. Now, you think of a tower, I just went on a bit of a tangent there, but you think of a tower, and a tower is unwavering, right? It's solid, it's sturdy. And I really feel like that really suggests that Mary Magdalene was a woman who was unwavering. She was unwavering in her devotion, in her courage, in her faith to the divine, right? And we know this because she was one, we have this documented, that she stayed at the cross when Jesus was being crucified. She didn't turn away. She stayed there and she looked. As heartbreaking as that would have been, can you even imagine, regardless if you think that, you know, they had an intimate relation or whatnot, but just to see another human be tortured like that right in front of you, like the courage she must have had, and that faith, that unwavering faith in something higher, to be able to stay and witness and to continue to open her heart after such a tragic circumstance. It is said that after Jesus was crucified, that she fled Jerusalem and she went to the south of France to continue the teachings. She must have been a very strong woman, again, anchored in faith, unwavering faith and devotion, to continue that after witnessing what she witnessed. Because for most people, I'm sure, if you witnessed that, right, you witnessed a crucifixion, someone teaching the gospel of love as Jesus was doing, and then to be crucified, don't you think the normal human reaction to that would be like, whoa, I better not do as he was doing, because guess what? Then I'm going to end up exactly like him. They're going to come for me if I keep doing what he's doing, if I keep teaching this doctrine, if I keep showing people this way of being, which is very radical and it goes against the authorities at that time. But Mary Magdalene, we know she didn't, you know, give into fear. She may have felt fear, but we know that she continued on. She continued to, again, anchor into that unwavering faith and devotion that she had to God, or the good as she calls it in her gospel. And I really think that really gives us a lot of information or insight as to what it means to be a tower, to be a watchtower woman. We also hear this idea of not just being a watchtower, but being a watchtower of the flock. So being a guide for others, a light bearer, if you will, showing people how to embody this path as well, to anchor in love. Because the watchtower woman or the priestess is never about trying to have control over the masses. Instead, it's about being a embodied way shower of the path, to awaken more of this light within yourself, but not trying to manipulate people or control people or trying to gain power. You know, this watchtower woman, she is anchored in the truth of the divine, which is that we are all one. And so from that perspective, there is no hierarchy. And why would you even need hierarchy? You know, when you're rooted in the truth of existence, again, which is oneness, every person's win is your win. When you're rooted in oneness, you want to see everyone succeed. No one is taking from yours. In fact, it's when we all win that we create more betterment for the world at large. It's actually when we create more love and harmony for ourselves and for everyone. So the Watchtower Woman is rooted in love over fear and scarcity, which most of the world is perpetuating in this day and age. And by embodying that truth, she walks as a way shower, as a guardian of the truth, and also a teacher of these principles, just in her embodiment and that unwavering devotion. So it's like when other people are in fear, she anchors more into what is true, into God, if you will. And from that perspective, it's able to create stability where there is chaos. She's able to bring calm when others are in crises. And so that is the power of the Watchtower Woman, and I truly believe that is really what Mary Magdalene and her essence is truly about, and what so many, I believe, priestesses are awakening on this at this time, in this remembrance of their divinity, of their spiritual power, to guide the rest of humanity back to oneness, back to truth. Because, you know, we talk about this divine feminine rising, right? That's quite common in the spiritual community. And what it truly means is that men and women are rising into their heart consciousness. We're rising into our intuition, into our divine knowing that we are not just these human physical constructs, that there is more to us. There is a divine nature to us. And that's what it means, the divine feminine rising. We're coming back to that awareness. We're coming back to this heart-centered awareness where we remember our oneness with all beings. So what I would love to do now is I've done another episode where I spoke about the whole Gospel of Mary, so I might link that in the show notes below if you want to check that out. But I'd love to just pull out one small section where we see Mary really standing as the Watchtower Woman in her gospel, in the Gospel of Mary. So I'm going to read a little bit for you guys. So this is, to set the scene, this is page 9 of the Gospel of Mary, and it's basically the disciples, the male disciples, are all feeling afraid because of what happened to Jesus, the crucifixion, and they're afraid that they will be next. They're going to get persecuted next. And I'll read from here. So it says, "The disciples were in sorrow, shedding many tears and saying, 'How are we to go among the unbelievers and announce the gospel of the kingdom of the Son of Man?' They did not spare his life, Jesus, so why would they spare ours?" And this is the bit I really want you to take note of. "Then Mary arose. She embraced them all and began to speak to her brothers. 'Do not remain in sorrow and doubt, for his grace will guide you and comfort you. Instead, let us praise his greatness, for he has prepared us for this. He is calling upon us to become fully human.' Thus, Mary turned their hearts towards the good," or as I mentioned in her gospel, she calls God the good. So Mary turned their hearts towards the good, to God, and they began to discuss the meaning of the teacher's words. And I love this passage because this really showcases Mary as a Watchtower Woman. It was when all the disciples were in fear, in scarcity, in lack, in separation, and Mary turned their hearts towards God. She turned their hearts towards the truth. She was able to anchor in that divine remembrance. She didn't just succumb to that, and you can sympathize with the disciples. Like, after seeing their leader, their master, be crucified like that, of course you would be terrified. Of course you would be afraid. But Mary was so anchored in that divine remembrance of who she is, of who they all are, of Jesus's message, that the kingdom is within you. What he was teaching was that we are spirit over matter. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that matter is above spirit, but actually spirit comes before matter. That's what the kingdom is, to resurrect with that knowing. The ego death, the crucifixion, which symbolizes the ego death, is the death of the belief that I am a separate body. Okay? And so I love that Mary rose as the leader in this passage, and she didn't, tell off her brothers. She wasn't trying to condemn them or judge them. Instead, she came at them from this compassionate place, from this open-hearted place. And she didn't try to control their way of thinking or tell them they were wrong to be in fear, but she steered them in the direction of the truth. She said, come now, my brothers, let's focus on the teachings. Let's focus on the message. And that's very much the way of the Magdalene, I believe, of the Watchtower Woman. It's not to control people. It's not, like I was saying before, to have hierarchy over people, power over people, but to be an anchor of light when others are in fear, when there's chaos, right? Which we're seeing a lot of in our world. We are going through big shifts in the collective right now. And what we need to see is the rise of the Watchtower Woman. We need people, regardless man or woman, but people in remembrance of their divinity, of the truth, of the truth of God, to be anchored in that, to be anchored in their light, into that remembrance, no matter what's happening out there, to be anchored in what is true, and to be that way shower for others, to hold, that tower of light, that lighthouse, to bring other people home, to show people the way, not controlling them, not saying do this, do that, but just steering them, hey, let's look over here. There's a lot of distraction out there. There's a lot of chaos going around. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of fear. But let's bring our attention over here. Let's focus on the good. So what I really want to get to in this episode is to really iterate here that Mary Magdalene was more than just a biblical figure. She really is so much more than that. What she represents is an archetype of the divine feminine, of the awakened feminine, and she's her essence. Even the word Magdalene, it's a vibration. I don't know if you feel that when you say the word Magdalene. A Magdalene, how does that feel? I know for myself, I feel this sense of dignity when I say Magdalene. I get a sense of beauty. I get a sense of just unconditional, unwavering love, like this powerful force of love. That's how it feels when I say that word Magdalene. And I invite you to say that word for yourself and see what kind of feeling you receive when you speak that vibration. Because like I said, it's not just about this biblical figure, but what she represents within us, within the collective, what's becoming alive within our DNA right now. And I really believe there are so many Magdalenes, if you will, on the planet right now that are remembering. And I consider myself one of them. And I really have to say, the way that you will know if you're a Magdalene is you will hear the call. She will call you. That's what she did to me. She called me many years ago and I followed that thread. I didn't even know who Mary Magdalene was, but I heard the call. And she will call you and she will say, remember me. Remember yourself. And it will be subtle. It won't be a loud voice in your head probably. But she will leave you signs. There will be synchronicities. There will be a pull towards certain content maybe. Maybe I appear on your YouTube feed, right? Follow the call. Mary is calling her women. She is calling her Watchtower Women. And as I say that, I feel her. I'm feeling the energy as I say that. She is calling us because now is the time for the divine feminine to step into power. And that's not to say women are leading and being on top. It's not to say that we can't, but that's not what I'm getting at here when I talk about this divine feminine rising. What I'm talking about is these Watchtower women, the divine feminine anchoring in the truth of oneness, remembering that we are all humans we are all divine beings having a human experience. And it is our divine nature which is interconnected with all living beings on this earth. Not just even humans, like all the elements, the minerals, the plants, the animals, we are all interconnected. And it is time for us to start remembering that interconnectedness and to come back to the foundations of what it means to be in harmony with all living beings. You know, the teachings that Jesus and Mary were really perpetuating during their ministry was so simple. It was so simple. What was the main teaching? Love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor. Think about that. Love thy neighbor. Love your enemies. Love. That was their message. And we've complicated it. You know, you see what's happening in the news recently. There's a lot of controversy over religion. People proclaiming Jesus as the Lord, our Savior, but then hating on others, on political parties. I think you get my drift. I don't even want to go there. But what I'm trying to say is, let's come back to the core teachings of what Jesus truly was about, what Mary Magdalene was about. Love thy neighbor. Love everyone as you would love yourself. What did Mary do when the disciples were in separation, when they were in fear? She guided them back to the truth. This is what the Magdalenes, the Watchtower Women, are here to do at this time. When people are in separation, when the world is pulling your attention towards the chaos in the news, the wars, the crime, there is all of this logical evidence why we should be living in fear right now, right? Everything on social media, everything is telling us, be afraid. People are bad. You know, get security cameras on your home because crime rates are increasing. Get a gun, protect yourself. Look at all these thugs on the street. Look at these murderers, these rapists. Look at all this bad negativity in the world. You must think I'm crazy to be thinking, well, let's just open our hearts. Let's just love everyone. It's pretty radical, right? It's pretty radical. But guess what Jesus was? He was a radical. That's why they crucified him. Why would they crucify someone whose message was to love everyone? Think about that. Why would they crucify someone whose message was to love everyone? Because it's radical. When someone's doing something that we deem as inappropriate, as wrong, when we want to judge them and criticize them and hold that person out of our heart, the most radical thing you can do is to love them. Imagine, I'll give you a tangible example. You're dating someone and that person cheats on you. The logical ego mind would say, well, that person is an a-hole. Do not forgive them. You should condemn them, make them a bad person, judge them. You would sound like a complete crazy person to extend love to that person that did that to you, right? To forgive them. Radical. The ego is like, no, they don't deserve my forgiveness. No, they don't deserve my love. But this is the problem with our world, don't you see? This is the problem with our world, is that we are all in this separation consciousness. That I love you only when you behave in the way that I want you to behave, or when you believe what I believe, or when you do as I say, or you think like I say. But what about when people challenge our egos? What about when people do things that trigger us? What about when people hurt us? What about when people hurt others? How do we open our hearts? How do we continue to open our hearts through that? But that is what Mary and Jesus did. That was their message. When Jesus was being crucified, what was his famous words? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What did Mary do after they crucified her beloved? She continued the teachings. They were teaching us this radical way of being, which we haven't been taught. And they were radical because that goes against almost like our human nature, our animalistic nature, which wants to fight, which wants to run, which wants to accuse people, to judge people, to criticize people. And it actually takes a divine awareness. It takes us moving out of our animalistic nature and accessing our higher truth, the divine truth, the good, the God within ourselves, our higher self, our soul, if you will, anchoring that into the present moment, into our bodies, into our awareness, into our consciousness. And from that lens, it is only from that lens that we can extend love to another. And do you see how radical that is? Like, really ponder that to really understand how radical they were. They were rebels at this time, or even in the times we're living now. Like, this way of being, this way of thinking, it challenges everything in our society. It challenges it because we have been told that we have a right to defend our country, right? That's why we go to war. We have a right to do that. We have a right to kill people. But this side is better than this side. And don't you understand, like, we've been seeing history repeat itself for so long, that this way of being, this divide and conquer, where is it getting us? This is shadow masculine energy, control, fear, this party versus this party, when we're ignoring the bigger picture right now. And it is time for the Watchtower Woman, that's why I wanted to do this episode, to really start anchoring in what is true and to rise as leaders in the sense that we become beacons of light to guide humanity back to the truth, back to the way of love. How do we do that? By being embodiments of that, by walking the path of love. That is why Mary Magdalene is associated with the path of the rose lineage. What is that? It is divine feminine lineage, a Venusian lineage even, that connects us to these divine feminine principles, which is very much about awakening the rose of the heart, right? Petal by petal. But it is this rose awakening in our heart where we can really stand in that divine feminine energy, which is so powerful in her sovereignty. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. We can't have sovereignty if we don't know who we are. You know, people think that they have sovereignty by accumulating material wealth or assets, or by, you know, reaching a certain status in society. But that isn't sovereignty. It's not sovereignty because you're missing the whole point of your existence. Your existence is not to accumulate more in the material world. It's not to say that that's wrong. You can accumulate while we're here having a human experience. We're here to play with the resources, to stimulate the five senses, but to not forget who you are internally. Like, that is your purpose, that is your mission. This is why you are here on this earth plane, is to remember who you are. And it's only when you start to remember who you are is when you actually step into sovereignty. And that is what Jesus and Mary were teaching, and that is why they were such a threat to the powers that be at that time. And even still to this day, that's why they butchered the story of Mary and Joshua. That's why, because they don't want us to know the truth. Because the truth leads people back to their divine sovereignty. And if people are sovereign, then guess what? We get to create a new reality for ourselves. And the people that have the power at the moment, they are a minority. So the more of us that band together, this is the divine feminine awareness of unity consciousness, the more of us that band together with a cause, a common cause, where we want peace, we want harmony, we don't want wars on this planet anymore. We want to return to caring for our environments, not just our immediate family, but all the children of the earth, all the animals of the earth, all of the plants, the environment, the water, the air, the minerals. Like, we need to come back to that awareness that we need to start caring for all of it. And we can, but it takes us remembering who we are and coming back to our sovereignty. So the last thing I want to talk about is, how do we awaken our heart, right? Like, how do we awaken this beautiful rose that lives within us? How do we walk as Watchtower Women, as priestesses of the rose, of Magdalenes? How do we do that? Well, I really believe Mary leaves so many clues for us in her gospel, and one of which is about her journey into the underworld, dealing with the 7 veils of the ego. Essentially, it's the 7 deadly sins. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we're bad. It doesn't mean that we're flawed as humans. It's not to make ourselves wrong, that we need punishment or something. And I've done an episode on the veils of the ego in, I can't remember the exact episode, but I'll link it in the show notes if you want to check that out. But essentially what Mary is saying when she talks about her descent is about how we need to go into these lower parts of ourselves, the lower chakras, and really do a bit of cleansing there, to really do some shadow work where we look at the things that prevent us from opening our heart, you know. And often it's our past hurts, it's our wounds, it's something happened when we were younger where we were made to feel afraid, you know. And usually we mask fear with anger, with resentment, with judgment, with criticism, even perfectionism. There's all these ways that we cope with fear. But if you look underneath a lot of those emotions, right, like say resentment or anger for that matter, underneath that is fear. There's fear there. There's a fear of being hurt again. So I'm going to protect myself so I don't get hurt anymore. And most of humanity is living from that state of consciousness. They're living from a vibration of fear. They are living from this fear of separation, that they're alone doing life by themselves, that there's nothing after this lifetime. Like, once you die, that's it. A lot of people are living from that state of awareness, even unconsciously. You know, that's why there's such a deep fear of death. We shouldn't be afraid to die. Like in other cultures, in some cultures around the world, death is a celebration, because they understand death doesn't mean the end. Nothing in nature dies, so why would we think that we die? But we've been told that, you know, this life is all there is, that this human body is all there is, that everything in the material plane is God. When it's not, it doesn't mean anything. And so we need to look at that. We need to go into the things that we don't really want to look at, you know, our pain, the places where we are in defense, where we don't want to open our heart. Why don't we want to open our heart? What are we afraid of? Why are we afraid of love? You know, people always say like love hurts, right? There's so many songs about love hurting. But the thing is, love doesn't hurt. If you've ever experienced love, it doesn't hurt. It feels wonderful. What hurts is the ego. That's the truth. What hurts is other people's fear projected on you or themselves. When you love someone and then they withdraw their love, that hurts. But that's not love. Because love, and this is what is spoken about in A Course in Miracles, love is extension. So love is an endless stream. You cannot withhold your love. Like, love just extends, like I said. You can't stop the flow of love. So if you feel that someone loved you and then they don't love you anymore, then that means that they never loved you to begin with, because love doesn't end. There is no end or stopping of the flow of love. It's always there. So really reflect on that, really think about that, because love is really, we don't really understand love because we've been conditioned what love is through like movies and marriage, and what we think like, oh, our parents get married or we get married and we think that's what love is. But love, like I said, in A Course in Miracles, this is literally the sentence, love is extension. And it took me a long time to really understand that. Like, I really had to sit with that. Love is extension. What does that mean? Love is extension, because we haven't been taught that. We think love is, it's my heart opening and it feels really good and magical, or we love someone and, we want to do these things for them, or they do these things for us. But love is extension. Really sit with that. So to open your heart and to extend love, it's an unwavering force. And once you start streaming love, you can't unstream it. It's, like I said, it's forever flowing. And so if that love is not streaming through you, within you, well, why not? What is blocking it? What is standing in the way? Why are you depriving yourself from this beautiful energy? From this beautiful stream of consciousness even? Like, what are you afraid of? And a big wound that I think a lot of us have received on planet Earth, just with all the conditioning that we get fed since we're children, is that we're unworthy of love. That somehow we need to deserve love. That's been my story. How many of us feel like, well, if I improve the way that I look, or I am smarter, or I tick the boxes off in society, or I earn more money, or if I change my body type, or if I do this, or have this cosmetic surgery, or if I get more followers, or whatever the thing, right? Then maybe I'm deserving of love. That is the biggest lie we've ever been told. Because love, like I said, is extension. And the way that we are loved by the divine, by God, by the universe is, like I said, it's that extension of love. It just is, it's a never ending. It just flows. That tap, once it's turned on, it can't be turned off. So if you're not feeling that love that is always there, then what I would say is, why not? Why not? What blocks do you have? Why are you resisting it? Do you feel unworthy on some level? Do you feel like, well, like I haven't done anything to deserve that? Or what if you don't need to do anything to deserve that? What if that is your birthright? What if you are that? What if there is nothing you need to do or achieve to receive that, but you are that? And because you receive that, you give that just naturally. And rather than trying to resist or block or challenge, you just allowed. You just flowed with what is. And I love Mary Magdalene, this idea of the Magdalens being this unwavering faith, unwavering devotion to love. So radical that they were able to, when all the disciples fled the scene when Jesus was being crucified, it was Mary, it was the woman who stayed, and they watched. And there's something in that which I think all of us can tap into when we're looking at these parts of ourselves that need love, that need compassion, that need tenderness. These parts of ourselves that feel unworthy, that feel like we're not good enough, that feel beaten down by life. Because this 3D existence, it really is about suffering. It's through the suffering that we actually turn towards the good. That's just the nature of reality, the polarity, the light and dark. We need to experience darkness in order to experience the light. But rather than turning away from the dark, what if, as Mary did, we stayed, we looked at it head on. We didn't turn away, we didn't run and hide. We didn't give in to fear, but we just held our light. We stayed in that devotion to truth, as Mary did when Yeshua was being crucified. Imagine if we applied that to our own demons or our own shadows, so to speak. Imagine if we were unwavering in our love, like I said, that extension of love, to pierce that part of us that believes we're unlovable or unworthy, to pierce that with love, unshakable, unwavering love. And to not have to fix the situation. Mary wasn't there trying to resist the situation, trying to change the situation, but to accept it. To accept it and to not close our heart in the pain, but rather to crack ourselves open even more so that we can meet other people when they're going through tough times, when they're in their darkness, when they're in their pain. Because, I was having this conversation with one of my clients yesterday that we cannot give to another what we haven't given to ourselves. And we don't understand this in our culture because we haven't been taught that. Giving and receiving are the same energy. If you said to me, hey, Danny, can I have $100? If I don't have $100, I can't give you that $100, right? We understand that. So what we need to understand, if we can't be compassionate with ourselves, if we can't forgive ourselves, if we can't hold light for our darkness, if we can't sit with our own pain, how do we then expect to truly meet other people in their suffering? Whether that be our partner, our children. Like, if we haven't fully learned to love all the aspects of ourselves, how can we then go and love our child unconditionally? Or our partner, right? How can we love them unconditionally if we don't love ourselves unconditionally? We just can't. You cannot give what you don't have. That is how it works. You cannot give what you don't have. That is why it's so important that we do the work and we bring our attention back to ourselves, and we really use Mary Magdalene as a way shower or as an inspiration or a guide as to how we can actually transmute this dense energy that exists within us and transmute it into the light, to bring our divinity more into our human vessel by transmuting the shadow, by looking at the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at, and offering ourselves so much compassion and grace, as Mary did. So much compassion and grace as she showered the disciples with. Unwavering devotion, unwavering courage, unwavering love, that extension of love that is just pouring, just emanating out. That is what it means, in my opinion, in what I've understood about the Magdalene. That is what it means to be a Magdalene, what it means to be a Watchtower Woman, to be a sister of the rose, to be this light bearer of love in the world, where you are unshakable, where you are rooted in what is true, in that divine remembrance of who you are. And in that light, in holding that energy within yourself, you are able to emanate that energy to all of those around you that are within your presence and awaken the light within them. So I feel like that's all I wanted to share here today. I really hope that if you're being drawn to this episode, that what I've spoken about here today ignites something within you, maybe a divine remembrance of the Magdalene fire that exists within you, the tower, the lighthouse, the way shower for those who are lost. And if you have any other comments or you would like to know anything else about the Magdalene path or anything you would like to discuss about Mary Magdalene, then you can always let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me on social media. I love hearing from you. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for listening, and many blessings to you, and I'll see you in my next episode. Mwah.